Okay, good afternoon. I was asked, are we experiencing a water crisis or is our water in a crisis? And I think let's answer that question when we get closer to the end and have some questions. And I think it's not all bad news. There is some good news always, and it depends how you ask the question.
Water, would you like to get some water? Really good prices. Water? Excuse me? Are you interested in water, madam? Hi there. This is water from Somalia.
How much this one?
That one's 20 kilometers. This one that's 10 kilometers. Children in Somalia are having to walk 10 kilometers to get water, sometimes in drought up to 50 kilometers. So you need to walk 30 kilometers for this water. Are you interested?
No, I'm not.
So are you interested? Doesn't look like I'm selling any water today. This is my first customer. Would you like to go for the 1 kilometer water?
Okay.
He's got 2 kilometers to travel. 200 meters so far. Fortunately, you haven't traveled far enough.
I'm so dying for this water. I finished. Yes!
So now you can have the water.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well done for getting it. You should always check the ingredients. Cholera,
Polio? Typhoid.
hepatitis A.
Not good?
Those are all deadly diseases.
It is dangerous.
Are you happy drinking this water?
No.
Water?
The reason why I like to introduce the talk with this slightly dated clip is that the awareness of water, generally speaking, in the developed world is relatively low. And you saw some things here which people aren't even aware of some of the basic diseases that we have in water. And water's an effort. Why should we walk for it and the likes? I think Cape Town's been sensitized quite a lot. But what I'd like to do is present some, I call them crude facts, because they're not very well covered by government, and you'll see why. And they're not really covered in the media unless it's really bad news. So I want to look at some real scientific facts. Then we do have some symptoms that I think will talk to the previous speaker and to the panel, where climate change is having an impact. The question is, can you calculate the impact? And the answer is yes and no. Some of it we can, some of it we can't. And the big question is, do we have water wars in South Africa? We certainly have some battles. And, is it the beginning of wars? Are there solutions? And there certainly are. And somebody has to take the money out of their pocket for them. And is there hope? I'm certainly hopeful, but I'm going to show you some facts that are rather crude. This is from the WWF, and I don't know if you can see the detail, but the top left-hand beaker shows that roughly 8% of our rainfall 8% of our land receives 50% of our rainfall. So just think about that. Okay, we're not like other countries. We also do not have a very high rainfall if you go down. We've got 490 millimeters as opposed to the global average of 814 in the white cloud. Next to it, you see 1,800 millimeters. That is the evaporation potential, okay, from our surface waters in South Africa, which is 3 times the rainfall. Should we be storing our water on the surface, is the question we ask. It was a no-brainer 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's not going to work now. So if you have a look at roughly 9% of the rain, so block number 3, top at the top, 9% of the rain lands up onto the soil, of which Most of it goes into rivers of the 9%, and then 4% goes to recharge the groundwater. So Cape Town's groundwater is not very healthy at the moment because we haven't had very good rainfall since 2015. It's improved over the last season, end of last year. So if we have a look at this picture, what it tells us is that we've got 49 billion cubic meters of surface runoff. And that's a high level of assurance without climate change. Climate change is not in this picture. 30% of that is available with a level of assurity of roughly 97%. So cities work on 97%. So out of 100 years, 3 years, we won't get all the water we normally get. We get part of it. So that's 15 billion cubic meters, okay? And by 2030, we need 17.7. The reality is, this is dated 2016. The same number was used in 2002 and was suppressed. People lost their jobs, and those of you in the sector will know who they are because that news was to be put out at a national conference. The press is a lot freer now. We're able to say a lot more what we want. So the reality is since 2002, our water allocation with a high level of certainty, 97%, is fully allocated. So we cannot produce more food, and we cannot develop more property and the likes, okay? So it's not the end, but this is the reality, okay? So we say 98%. That calculation doesn't take, and I'll show you a slide, it doesn't take climate change into consideration. This is all things being equal. So in 2002, climate change wasn't something we spoke about. Climate change actually started long before that, but you know, it's easier to look backwards. So we're at 98%. The 97% is the C part of the water cycle. There's a lot of terminology that's used in the water cycle. To keep it simple, we focus on 3%, which is the potable water, of which 2/3 is locked up in the North and South Pole. The rest is our rivers and lakes and dams, which is roughly 1%. Now in South Africa, our National Water Resource Strategy talks to that 1%. So I say, well, it's less than 3%. But we ignore the 97% where most of our water is. So we have to change our paradigm somewhat. What we were doing for the last 100 years is actually not applicable. So without going into too much technical detail with our various interbasins and the transfers you can see there, but where we're here now in the Berg catchment management area, by 2025, which is 6 years' time, the deficit is 508 million cubic meters. Umvotium Zimkulu, 788. Upper Vaal, 764. Lesotho Highlands is supposed to mitigate phase 2, part of that. The Northwest will have a slight excess, but it's the exception. So at a national level, by 2025, we'll be short of something like 2,000 million cubic meters on average. So this really talks to the previous slide. We have no coherent policy response. All we're doing is we're trying to decrease the demand. Okay. Now, this talks to climate change, and these are measurements that were undertaken by projects funded by the Water Research Commission, which is owned by the Department of Water and Sanitation. So these are government numbers. They've been scientifically verified, and they are correct. We can see we've got an inflection point in 1982. What that means, we were wetter than average as a country prior to 82, and drier than average. But what's really worrying is the seasonal shift, and it's here in the Western Cape. We've really dried out in the winter rainfall areas. Okay. So we're relying on water yields out of the rainfall patterns when we've got this in the background. And this is spoken by nobody except those deeply involved in the water sector. So in the red block there, this means that the current response via demand-side management is inappropriate because you're trying to reduce the demand on a certain volume that used to be available. So if you move on to some of the symptoms of these facts, is Makanda, so Grahamstown, they hit the day zero earlier on this year. Potable water production system was inadequate to treat highly turbid waters. Most of the country used to be able to do this. Why can't we do it anymore? When we've got high rainfall, we do get higher turbidity in our receiving waters. The distribution system has collapsed in the town, and the sanitation network is in a shambles. Beaufort West, first town in South Africa to reuse directly sewage. But there's no point in reuse. They've reduced. There's no point in reusing if you've got no water. So they ran out of water. Okay, they drilled boreholes, and because they didn't get rain for 5 years, what happened is the boreholes just had to go deeper and deeper and deeper. So I'm not saying reuse or reduce is bad, but you need new water. So Cape Town, we've reduced our consumption from 900 megaliters, so 900 million liters a day, down to 500 before last year's rains came. It's about 650 at the moment. So we're way off the 900, so people are very sensitized. And it's only big city, uni city, that's actually sensitized to the water situation because of the near miss of day zero. And just remember who sorted out day zero. The farmers from the Overberg area gave 3 weeks of water, and then there was rain that came in that last week. Otherwise, it was day zero. And it's not a Grahamstown day zero, and 4.2 million people die of thirst after 3 days. But the reality is we've been drying out since 1982, and we've done absolutely nothing except put the Berg River Dam into place, and we said the rain will come. It's not coming. There is one savior for Cape Town, seeing it being Cape Town, is that it's the only metro that produces its own water. Not the bulk water, but takes the bulk water from national government's dams and then produces potable water. The rest of the uni cities get their potable water from the water boards. Okay. Northwest Water, the shortages are very well published in the press. In Limpopo, the investigations, 2 prime ministers, failed water augmentation projects. We've put some dams in there, but the communities are not connected. Polokwane has got 46% water losses. Cape Town pre-drought was 14.7, 14.8. When you say water losses, unaccounted for water, so it's mostly leaks, a little bit of theft, and some administration or accounting issues. Olifantspoort water plant shut down. The residents shut down the plant. They locked it up. And nobody dared go and open that plant up in Limpopo. In Mpumalanga, the groundwater resources are polluted by sewage and by mining, untreated sewage and mining, and the towns are suffering from acute network collapses. So Rand Water provides, some of the towns can provide, but the network can't take the water, can't take the pressure. One very big collapse that we've had is where we've got just under 800,000 people living is Mfuleni, what was the part of the Vaal Triangle. And there's roughly 550 million rand of bulk water that hasn't been paid for from Rand Water, accumulated over a 10-year period. There's 150 million liters a day of untreated sewage going into the ground, the streets, and into the Vaal River. 90% of the sewage is not reaching the 3 treatment sewage works. It's not getting there. The infrastructure is completely collapsed. So if you think you've got it tough in Cape Town, let me tell you, it's a Rolls Royce compared to Mfuleni. So the SANDF was deployed, and you know, when a country decides to send its defense force to go and stabilize the sanitation, it's not really a water, it's a sanitation issue, purely to try and stop the theft and the likes, which are not the cause. Those are symptoms of economic collapse. And the Defence Force went in there, asked for 200 million, now needs 850 million rand, so nearly R1 billion, and it's a 5 billion rand problem. There's been no improvement. Okay, the sewage is still going into the Vaal River, which is feeding the heart of Gauteng, the economic hub. This is a good and a sad story in Kimberley. The reason why the flamingos started dying off is that the sewage wasn't getting to the flay. And the reason the sewage used to get to the flay is that the network could get it there, and I think it's a farmer who in actual fact made his land available so that the flamingos could come in. It's the only place in South Africa where I think it's a lesser flamingo actually breeds. And it's breeding off partially treated sewage. The network in the city of Kimberley collapsed to an extent where it couldn't get there. Then we had a bird issue, but it's a symptom. It's a symptom of the water infrastructure collapsing. And Kimberley is not a small town. So those, and I just took a snippet of them. There's 57 municipalities that have collapsed with water and sanitation according to national government. Okay, of the 200, I think 70-odd municipalities that we have. So we do have an issue, and I believe very strongly that this is a symptom of something else. It's a symptom of economic collapse and of governance and institutional collapse. Now, there's a lot of money around in South Africa, and we need roughly, the bad side is we need roughly R1 trillion to reinstate our infrastructure in South Africa to get water resilience so that we can attract the investment we require. We currently spend roughly R100 million a year at municipal and provincial and national level for water sanitation. We need an extra R100 million a year, and the fiscus thought it could fund 2/3 of that, and private sector would have to put in a third. The reality is it doesn't have any of the funds. So the fiscus is unable to fund it. So we have a symptom of underinvestment for 25 years, but we have an opportunity to invest from the private sector into water and waste infrastructure. Before I get to some of the solutions, SA Water Wars, so water is being used, is being weaponized. So Ugu, where Port Shepstone is a district municipality, also roughly 750,000 people, like Mfuleni, but it's a district municipality. And the water network over the last 2 years has been shut down by organized labor because they have a grievance with the district municipality who's a water service authority. So water has been weaponized. Okay? Mfuleni has a component of that. eThekwini, Westbrook, pump station on the north coast. Strikers let that fall apart on purpose. Nobody went to intervene, and the beaches were all polluted. That was early on this year. And then Polokwane Olifantspoort water plant shut down by the community. They actually locked the plant up, chased everybody away, and said, that's it, no water, until we get heard by national government. So I don't think it's water wars. I think it's water battles that are starting to be fought. So really, what are the solutions from a macroeconomic perspective? We need policy certainty, and we do not have an updated national water resource strategy that has been accepted by all stakeholders. We don't have that. So we've got a copy-paste job that was done nearly a decade ago, and we've got a moving target that's actually happening. So without policy certainty, what is the strategy? Do we need to change our National Water Act? It's accepted we need to. How do we do that? The biggest producer of water in South Africa is Department of Water Sanitation. It is also the regulator. So we ask ourselves, well, do we have regulatory certainty? We do in other sectors, but we don't in the water sector. So now I'm the producer of bulk water, and I'm also the regulator. And prices are not regulated, they just cost plus. Inefficiency times 2 plus a bit more, plus inflation, plus. And then the cities have to distribute, and they have to balance a budget. And your fixed costs are 80–90% of your tariff here. So they're fairly high investment. So we need to separate the producer of bulk water, who's also the custodian of our water, who's supposed to generate the policy, who's busy working on it, okay, and have the regulatory function separate to attract investment. So policy certainty, regulatory certainty. So the blue and green drop report, blue drop is for potable water quality. Cape Town's is very good. Most of the uni cities are actually fine. It's the smaller cities. And the green drop is your sanitation, so your sewage side. And those reports stopped in 2012 because 80% of the sewage works, which is about 4.2 billion liters of sewage, is not treated or inadequately treated of the 5 billion liters of sewage we discharge daily into our water courses, not all into the sea, into our water courses. Okay, so the little water we have, we are actually polluting also. So maybe we've got a bit of a crisis over there. From a property owner's perspective, there's actually very little you can do in general. You can really focus on demand side. And I think we saw in Cape Town is as soon as tourists started picking up that I can't have a shower, this and that, or maybe I can't, maybe we're going to have a day zero, the tourism took a knock. And we call this small water. We shouldn't be worrying about small water. But what we can do is small things like, aerators in taps and showers. And in Cape Town, this has been done. water pressure optimization in large buildings and shopping centers, for example. This is what the city does. So of the 500 megalitres it was using during the drought, that national department gave it, 70 to 80 megalitres a day of the saving was through pressure management in the water reticulation or network system. Okay, so you can do this in your business. You can save 10, 20% of your water by regulating the pressure. Systems leak. So in low demand, decrease the pressure, which is overnight, for example. And then during the day, you can increase the pressure. And your leaks don't increase because people are demanding more. Okay, so de-stress the system. Convert to smaller volume toilet flush systems. This is in the bylaws in Cape Town, for example, but that's for new developments. Waterless hand sanitizers, there's pros and cons. Air cons to feed toilets, for example. So here we're talking about dual reticulation network systems. The Australians went this way a decade ago, and they're starting to revert back to a single one because of the costs. So it's not that easy to have a dual reticulation system. It's possible, but there's a cost attached. Air-cooled air cons on the coast, yes, it could work, but I think it's not as efficient as water-cooled, but one can look at that. Water-wise gardens, I think Cape Town's gone a long way. In South Africa, we like to water our gardens and the like. Let's get rid of the grass. And then social engineering interventions to heighten awareness. That's why I showed the video at the beginning there. I think our awareness, we take water for granted. And when the water doesn't come out the tap, and it doesn't come out the tap for a week, or for several weeks, like in Beaufort West, it's a disaster. Business moves out, people move out. So we need to raise awareness, and we need to do it from educational perspectives, from business perspectives. We mustn't wait for government to do this for us. We're not a nanny state. We have to do that ourselves. And I think as a sector, we need to put water right up there. It's an economic enabler. At the moment, it's a disabler when we don't have it. On the reuse side, so separating black from grey water. So grey water is non-sewage bearing, less toxic, which can be reused for gardens, toilets, for your heating, ventilation, air conditioning, car washing, and the likes. Just got to be careful of potential infections. Black water treated for non-potable use, and I put non-potable because one has to do some serious social engineering to go into direct reuse, so reusing sewage, okay? People don't want to do that globally, and there's only really 2 big cities doing it. Well, one big city is Windhoek, and then there's Beaufort West. But generally speaking, EU only started a policy last year. People don't want to drink treated sewage. The irony is it's as good as any bottled water, and it's guaranteed to be because of the process it goes through. Old Mutual here in Pinelands, they are using their water direct reuse at 450 cubic meters per day. It's a very small number, but the principle's there, and the employees have accepted that to do that. And I think that's a very good case study to start moving South Africa onto direct reuse in time. We need new water. We can reduce so much, we can pinch the system so much, we can reuse so much, but we need new water. So groundwater can be used for potable and non-potable applications. In Cape Town, the quality varies quite a bit. Rainwater harvesting for potable and non-potable. We just got to remember in summer, Legionnaire's disease, etc. Legionnaire's disease kills. Our previous Minister of Environmental Affairs died of Legionnaire's disease. Okay, so storing water above ground, when it gets to 26, 27 degrees, you can get Legionnaire's disease, and what happens is you don't have to drink it, it's aerosoled. Okay, so watering the garden with it, you could be contaminated, and it's a deadly disease. So we just need to remember that we need to do things like chlorination or UV stabilization, for example. And then seawater for potable. For our coastal cities, seawater's there. It's 97% of our water is seawater. So I just picked up an example of Growth Point here, the retail complex in Woodstock. They're treating spring water, so groundwater, for potable use. They were pumping it out, and that's 45 cubic meters a day, which is quite a lot for the complex. And the V&A are planning a seawater reverse osmosis, so a desalination plant. And I've put this on purpose at 25 Rand a cubic meter for 5 megaliters a day. Now, 5 megaliters a day is really nothing, and the City of Cape Town put in 3 plants. One, I think, at about 5, and 2 at 7 and 7. The 2 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 3 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 4 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 5 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 6 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 7 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 8 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 9 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 10 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 11 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 12 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 13 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 14 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 15 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 16 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 17 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 18 at 7 and 7 in False Bay are working. 19 at 7 and 7 in Fal roughly 40 Rand a cubic meter because they're 2-year contracts. So you're amortizing your capital over 2 years. The one here at the V&A has been stopped because the contractor is in dispute because of the quality of the water. The quality of the water in an enclosed environment is going to be questionable. And it costs more, you can treat it. It just costs more money to do that. But here, they're looking at doing it over, let's say the life of the asset is 20, 25 years, down to 25 Rand a cubic meter. You're paying roughly 25 to 30 Rand a cubic meter, but that price will stay more or less the same, especially if you go off-grid with your energy, which is a third of the price, for the next 20, 25 years. There's a huge saving in actually doing that. So I'm just trying to mitigate the bad news out there with the one failed contract. Although at utility scale, you can take it down to between 9 and 12 Rand a cubic meter. And that's where Cape Town is going to go, and that policy was accepted this week. So Cape Town is going to do that, and it's going to build up capacity from the sea because of the groundwater limitations, but it's going to do it very conservatively. Okay, so from my perspective, it's too conservative, but it's not my money. So if we can decouple the economy using seawater desalination, where the technology is getting cheaper and cheaper, from the rainfall that is becoming erratic, and we can't actually guarantee that the rainfall over the next 10, 15 years will be the same. We know it's going down, but we don't know by how much. We don't know if it might go back up. If we decouple the economy and use desalinated water as the base load, now your agriculture is safer, and secondly, people will invest because there's water security into the future. And again, we've got to play the long game. We've got to look 20 years and not 2 years ahead. So I think from a poverty perspective, there's a lot of potential in new water from groundwater and from seawater if you're lucky to be on the coast. So I think we have a crisis squared. If what I've showed you here, and it's not to scare anybody, these are some of the facts. There's a lot more of them. But we need to have the narrative out there to realize that we're not only water constrained, we've really not treated water as a national priority for the last 25 years, and that needs to change. So in the water business, we have done that. We've petitioned the presidency. We are in there at the moment through the Public-Private Growth Initiative, and we were sector number 22. So water was the least important sector from government's perspective. We are now number 1. Okay, and we say that we're more important than the banking sector because you can count as much money as you want. If you don't have water, the money is going to get you nowhere. So we need to make water a priority. All our developments that we want to put into the country, apart from the Northwest, whatever water use license you're going to get, you're taking from somebody else. So just think about that. So there is hope, but we have to do things, we have to change things, we have to shift our paradigms. Hopefully I've informed you a little bit of background on our water situation.